Labyrinths is brought to you by Knox Robinson Productions. Please consider becoming a patron. For as little as $5 a month, you can listen to Labyrinths ad-free.
Visit patreon.com/Knox Robinson to learn more. Well, we're 30 minutes away from his trial.
You're really good at counting down. I'm curious to know what this prosecutor is going to be like, and if he'll even look me in the face.
Are you going to look him in the face?
I'll definitely look at him in the face and see what he does.
What about Pacelli?
I'll look him in the face, too. He probably won't look at me.
You got cojones.
I believe in looking things in the face.
Yeah.
Especially since I've not done anything to them. Feeling lost?
Then you're in the right place.
I'm Amanda Knox.
And I'm Christopher Robinson.
And this is Labyrinths.
Okay, welcome to a special impromptu on-the-road episode of Labyrinths recorded in Italy. Apologies for the audio quality here. We weren't exactly planning to do an episode, but given the recent events, we thought we should whip out the phone and make a few recordings. So, what you're going to hear are some reflections from Amanda in the immediate lead-up to her trial for calunnia or slander at the courthouse in Florence on June 5th, followed by her immediate thoughts in the aftermath of hearing the verdict. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the details of this trial, why is she on trial, what's it all about, I recommend you go back and listen to Labyrinths episode 79, Still on Trial in Italy, where we get into all those details and talk exactly about what's at stake in this trial, what the evidence is, etc. I will briefly summarize it here, though. So, in short, when Amanda was first arrested, she was put through 53 hours of questioning over 5 days in a language she barely understood. And on the final night of questioning, she was questioned overnight without a lawyer, without an interpreter, and was psychologically destabilized, slapped in the back of the head, deprived of food and bathroom break, and basically psychologically tortured to the point where she couldn't really tell which reality was true. And the police convinced her to sign some statements that they authored, implicating her boss, Patrick Lumumba. This happened because the police found a text message on her phone in which she had attempted to tell Patrick, "See you later," but had translated that American English idiom literally into Italian. Well, it doesn't translate well into Italian, and the cops read that as her making a literal appointment to meet him later. Because of this weird little linguistic twist of fate, they misinterpreted that and then assumed that Amanda had met Patrick that night and that she was lying to them. So for hours and hours and hours, they called her a liar when she told them the truth, that she had been at Raffaele's house that night. And for hours and hours and hours, they demanded that she tell them what happened with Patrick that night. What did you see Patrick do? What were you and Patrick doing? So the police brought Patrick's name into that interrogation room, and they bullied Amanda until she conjured up some memories and images of Patrick, because they told her, you need to remember what you don't remember. You need to remember what we want you to remember. You're not remembering correctly. And at one point, they told her that what had happened was she had amnesia because she had seen something so horrible she must have blacked it out. And, destabilized, thousands of miles from home, 20 years old, surrounded by people twice her age and speaking in a foreign language she couldn't understand very well. And in the immediate wake of her friend's death, in this very vulnerable place, she began to believe them, that she perhaps couldn't trust her own memories, and perhaps she had blacked it out. Now, it's really hard for people to imagine how you could start to believe something like this. But one of the tools of these coercive police tactics is to lie to suspects and to tell them things that prove their guilt, which aren't true. So the police did this to Amanda, like they've done in countless other cases, and they told her they had hard physical proof that placed her at the scene of the crime on the night of the murder. And this was a lie. They had no such proof. They never would find any such proof of that. But they told her this. They also told her that Raffaele said she wasn't with him that night. And that also wasn't true. They bullied and badgered Raffaele until they got him to admit that, yes, he couldn't say that she was with him while he was asleep. He technically couldn't affirm that statement. The cops came back and told Amanda, he says you weren't with him, right? So now she's being told that her memory of being with Raffaele is being contradicted by Raffaele. She's being told that they have hard physical proof that she was there that night. And now she's being told, you have amnesia because you witnessed something so horrible. Remember it correctly. Remember what you don't remember. That is the origin of these statements in which Amanda conjured up some images, very kind of incoherent and jumbled, of her boss, Patrick Lumumba. She was complying and doing what the police were asking of her. And in those statements that she signed, there's a sort of incoherent narrative of seeing Patrick near the house and hearing a scream and so forth. And, those statements led to the arrest of Patrick Lumumba, Amanda's boss, her arrest and Raffaele's arrest. And they happened in the middle of the night, one at 1:45 a.m. and one, I think, at 5:45 a.m., somewhere around there. A few hours after Amanda was let out of that pressure cooker of the interrogation room, she gathered her sanity as much as she could and said, this doesn't seem right to me. These so-called recovered memories don't feel real. They feel more like dreams than what my real memories are of being with Raffaele that night. And I can't testify to what I signed. The cops ignored her. They were off rushing to arrest Patrick Lumumba. And they wouldn't listen to her. They said, oh, your memories will return in time. So she asked for a piece of paper and she wrote down what is called a memoriale in this case. It's a handwritten statement. And in this handwritten statement, she essentially retracts everything that's in the statements that were typed up by the police. Now, when she wrote this, she was still in a kind of a state of existential crisis. She still couldn't really trust her own memories. She was still very psychologically destabilized. And you can see that if you read this document, which Amanda reads in full and kind of close reads and dissects what she was thinking back in Labyrinth episode 79, still on trial in Italy. And if you read that document, or if you listen to Amanda read it, you'll see that it's filled with all kinds of phrases like, perhaps I said this and perhaps I said that, in part because the police had nitpicked her memories of the actual night that she spent with Raffaele to the point where they made her feel as if she couldn't provide a perfectly time-stamped accounting of that evening. How long exactly did you watch the movie? What time did you start eating dinner? Did you eat dinner for 15 minutes or for 20 minutes? They made her feel as if her inability to do that meant that those memories were unreliable. And so in writing this statement, she shows hesitancy about those memories. But she also very clearly says, even so, those memories feel much more real to me than these supposedly recovered images of Patrick. And she says, I cannot testify. I cannot be a witness against Patrick. She says, I have severe doubts about the veracity of those statements. And she goes on to say things like, here are my questions. Who is the real murderer? Is there any evidence corroborating Patrick as the killer? Are my own memories reliable? These are all questions the police, honestly, should have been asking themselves. If the police had asked themselves those questions, they wouldn't have rushed off to arrest an innocent man. So what happened in 2009 is that Amanda was convicted of murder and of slander against Patrick Lumumba in a civil case, which was tried contemporaneously. In Italy, civil and criminal trials happen at the same time. What that meant was that there was the prosecutor, Giuliano Manini, and his co-prosecutor, Manuela Comodi. There was a lawyer for the Kircher family, and there was a lawyer for Patrick Lumumba, a guy named Carlo Pacelli. All of these lawyers were functioning essentially as prosecutors in the trial, cross-examining Amanda, etc. Now, even the Italian courts ruled very early on in her trials that those interrogations that led to that charge of slander were illegal. Amanda didn't have a lawyer. She didn't have an interpreter. They were not recorded as they were required to be. This is, again, a thing you'll find in coercive interrogations, is that so often they are conveniently not recorded. So you just have to trust the police's word. And, when Amanda reported what had happened in that room, that she had been slapped and so forth, she was actually charged with slander against the police for saying that, because the police denied it. And those charges were eventually dropped, but the charge of slander against Lumumba stuck. And though the interrogations were ruled illegal and a judge decided that they could not be used as evidence in the murder trial, he nonetheless allowed them to be used as evidence in the slander trial. And absurdly, the very same jury would be allowed to hear that evidence, and was just told, oh, just ignore that evidence, set it aside in your mind when you're thinking about the murder charge, but pay attention to it when you're thinking about the slander charge, which of course no one can really do. And so this was an incredibly biasing thing against her in terms of the murder charge. But the result of that was she was convicted of both. As you know, she was eventually acquitted in 2011 of the murder charge. Then she was reconvicted in absentia of the same crime. And in 2015, her and Raffaele were definitively acquitted of murder by the Italian Supreme Court per non aver commesso il fatto, for not having committed the act. However, in definitively acquitting them of murder, the Italian Supreme Court also upheld definitively Amanda's conviction for slander against Patrick Lumumba. And they upheld her sentence of 3 years in prison for that crime, which is an absurdly long amount of time in prison for that crime. And it's the maximum available penalty. Now, she had already spent 4 years in prison, so that was time served. She didn't have to serve any additional prison time. But according to the Italian state, as of 2015, she remained a convicted felon, and 3 of her 4 years of imprisonment had been rightfully served. And that was the end of the story. However, Amanda appealed this to the European Court of Human Rights in 2019, and they ruled in her favor, noting that her human rights had been violated during those interrogations because they had deprived her of a lawyer and an official translator, and they sanctioned Italy for those actions, ordering them to pay some small amount of damages and essentially scolding them. This doesn't really have any binding power, this ruling from the International Court. It can't overturn her conviction. However, a new law was passed in Italy in 2023, or 2022 maybe, which allowed for definitive cases to be reopened if there was a ruling from an international court, like the European Court of Human Rights. That law was actually drafted and passed by the Italy Innocence Project, or was sponsored by them, a fledgling organization that was formed in the wake of Amanda's wrongful conviction. And this new law allowed Amanda to reopen her case and bring it back to the Italian Supreme Court based on the ruling from the European Court of Human Rights. And in 2023, in October, the Court of Cassation, the Italian Supreme Court, overturned her slander conviction, and she became a defendant again. That's when we recorded Labyrinth's episode 79. Now, instead of definitively acquitting her, they sent it for retrial back at the appellate level, where she would have to defend herself against this accusation yet again. interestingly, they limited the scope of evidence available in this trial and said, look, the European court has already ruled that the overnight statements that the police typed up that Amanda signed were obtained, illegally. They were violations of her human rights, etc. Those statements are inadmissible in this trial. The only piece of evidence that is admissible for this charge of slander or calumnia is the memoriale, the handwritten statement that Amanda signed once she was by herself. Because no one can say that statement was coerced from her, right? So Amanda and I were feeling pretty good about that. That statement is very essentially a retraction. It's a recantation of the statements she was pressured to sign in the middle of the night. And going into this hearing on June 5th in Florence, Amanda was shaky. She was nervous, but she was feeling pretty good. And as the hearing began, there were some good signs. One of them was that Carlo Pacelli, Lumumba's lawyer, attempted to do a kind of dirty legal trick and submit a brief at the last minute without having notified the defense, in which he essentially tried to smuggle in a bunch of information about those earlier statements that had already been deemed inadmissible by the Supreme Court. And if the judge had allowed it, they wouldn't have had a chance to rebut those. The defense wouldn't. So thankfully, the judge in this case, after deliberating for 10 minutes, said, no, we're not admitting this, and kind of scolded Pacelli for trying to flout the rules in this way. So, they said there's no rebuttals. The earlier hearing in April, they had already done their closing arguments. So the only thing that was left to do was for Amanda to make a spontaneous declaration if she wanted. And she had prepared a statement, and she did. She went up there and spoke in Italian, talked directly to the judge and the jury for about, 7 or 8 minutes. And she explained what was going through her head when she was writing that memoriale. She explained that Patrick was her friend, etc. She poured her heart out, and it took a lot of courage. Her lawyers were proud of her, and I was proud of her. And then the judges announced that they would head into recess to deliberate with the rest of the jury for about 2 hours. And where I'm going to bring you now is in that waiting period where Amanda and I were biding our time to hear what that verdict would be. Okay, so we're in the long wait.
Yeah.
You made your declaration.
I don't know how long I talked. What do you think?
I don't know, maybe
like 7 minutes.
7 minutes or something.
Yeah. I have no idea whether anyone cared or was listening to me. I really don't know what's going to happen. I'm not sure if the judge was interested in what I had to say. A number of times she just sort of looked away and didn't seem interested, which was concerning for me. At the same time, she also put Pacelli in his place. I was a little bit kind of numb and above myself. And then I came and sat back down, and they went into Camera di Consiglio, and they're going to be in there for at least an hour and a half, if not more, to decide on the verdict. And I honestly have no idea what it's going to be. I have no clue. I don't know if she has already decided I'm guilty, and so she doesn't need to hear what the prosecutor is saying. The prosecutor said that he didn't have anything else to say. So I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit adrift, and I just feel sick. I really hope that it goes well.
Why does it matter to you that it goes well?
Because this is my, I guess it's not my last chance, but it would be super, super meaningful to me to be recognized as innocent, because this charge is what everyone points to say that I got away with murder. because they say, an innocent person wouldn't have slandered somebody. Only a guilty person would have done that. And so they say, even if I don't know exactly how she was involved with killing Meredith, well, we know that she was, because look at her. She's a liar. She, accuses innocent people. And it's like, it would be so deeply true and satisfying and vindicating to be recognized as innocent and have all of those people eat their words. And be able to really truly hold my head high and have nothing that anyone could say anything against me. Because right now, it's one thing for me to say I didn't, slander Patrick, but then they're like, well, the court ruled against you. And I'm like, well, now I have to say, well, the court was wrong.
Yeah.
But if the court rules for me, then I can be like, I didn't do shit. I got nothing on me. And all of you tried to tear me down, a 20-year-old girl, and all of you participated in tearing me down. So, and I don't need to say it. It's the court who can say it.
A lot of people online have wondered why you felt the need to come here in person and not just Zoom in.
No one listens to Zoom. If anything, we know that nobody cares about Zoom. I think it mattered that I had the courage to show up here and get hit in the face with a camera just to get in here in order to say my piece and hear the verdict from their own lips and make eye contact.
Yeah. I'm right here.
I'm a real person.
I'm a real person. Say it to my face.
Yeah. And we'll see.
Well, I hope you win.
Me too. I'd really like that.
Hey, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is only possible thanks to listener support. So please consider becoming a patron. Visit patreon.com/KnoxRobinson.
As I'm sure you know, if you've seen the news, the verdict was not favorable to Amanda. She didn't collapse on the floor the way she had in previous trials, but she did kind of go numb immediately. She was in shock, as were her lawyers, as I was, as I think many people were. It seemed kind of impossible, given the limited scope of this evidence, that they could find her guilty of slander, when the only document in question was a recantation in which she said she could not testify against Patrick Lumumba. She had been planning to give a statement to the media in the wake of this verdict, but decided against that. And we hightailed it out of Florence. And where I'm going to bring you now is to that car ride, where after processing this devastating turn of events, Amanda finally found some words to reflect on what had just happened. Okay, here we are, driving away from Florence because...
Fleeing Florence, yes. Because Florence does not like me, apparently. Came into court this morning and got into the courtroom early before anybody else. Then finally, after 45 minutes of sitting around there, court started. And then I gave a statement and I poured my heart out, as per usual, talking about how I'd been psychologically tortured by the police and that I had never meant to accuse an innocent person, and Patrick was my friend and I was, I'm innocent, please find me innocent. And they went into chambers and came out about an hour and a half later and found me guilty and reinstated the verdict, reinstated the time, 3 years, the maximum penalty, and said that there would be 60 days until they would deliver what in Italy is called the motivation document, which explains the verdict. I'm still flabbergasted that they even think that anything that I said in that was accusatory. I would have been and was frankly astonished that anyone could possibly find me guilty of willingly and knowingly accusing an innocent man of a crime when the
text of that document is, oh my God, I don't know who the killer is, and I'm really scared and confused, and I'm recanting.
In that memorandum, you say things like, here are my questions for the police. Like, who is the real murderer? Like, it's not something you would say if you were accusing someone of being the murderer.
No,
right?
And I said things like, I completely doubt the veracity of what those statements are, and I'm still really confused, but like, I can't testify.
The thing that's shocking to me is that to convict you of slander, they not only have to show that you willingly...
That's the two things. They had to prove that I was making an accusation and that I made that accusation knowing that Patrick was innocent. But also, like, nothing in my statement says he killed Meredith. It says, I don't know if he killed Meredith. So I'm just, like, waiting now in this irritated place of, like, how in the world are you going to justify that? And, my lawyers are also, they were shocked, and they very clearly said, we're going to keep fighting this. This is ludicrous. We're going to wait for the motivation document in order to figure out, like, how the hell they're going to justify this insane verdict. And then we're going to attack the crap out of it and take it to the Supreme Court in Italy, which is great. But in the meantime, that could happen frickin' a year or two from now before I get the opportunity to go in front of the court. And that's what happened.
How do you feel?
I'm feeling a combination of, like, angry and numb and just flabbergasted. I suddenly feel like I'm in hostile territory. Like, we spent a day in Rome 2 days ago, just wandering around having a good time being tourists, and I felt great. I felt safe. I felt, welcome. And now I feel like I'm on hostile ground and I'm feeling really sick. And I'm trying to let go of my anger right now. So I'm just going to... I really like that story of the horse.
It's an old Buddhist proverb about the farmer whose horse runs away one day, and all the neighbors come around and say, what rotten luck. And the farmer says, maybe. And then the next day, his horse comes home and brings with it 3 other wild horses.
Right.
And all the neighbors come by and say, what good luck. And the farmer says, maybe. The next day, his son is trying to tame one of the wild horses. He falls and breaks his leg. The neighbors come by and say, what rotten luck. He says, maybe. The next day, the army comes by looking to conscript all the young men, but his son is laid up with a broken leg and he gets passed over. And the neighbors say, what good fortune. And of course, the farmer says, maybe.
Yeah. So the idea being that you don't actually know if an outcome is good or bad luck, things just happen. And this just happened. And it honestly doesn't change anything in the sense that, like, I was already convicted and sentenced to 3 years, so nothing has actually changed. There was only hope that it would change for the better, and I guess I just kind of got attached to that hope a little bit. And even now, my attorneys say that hope is not gone, it's just a longer process. And maybe it being a longer process is a good thing, I don't know. I don't know.
It's already been
it's just a thing.
17 years
It's been
that this
17
has been going
years.
on. And it's going to be at least 18 now
19,
to go to the Supreme Court. 19.
Maybe 20.
Is a part of you sad?
All of me is sad.
Yeah.
Not just a part of me. All of me is sad. Because I was really... after my last trip to Italy, I felt like I was in a place of making good memories and reconciling and feeling really good about, my relationship with Italy and with the people of Italy. And that has definitely been challenged now.
Can you talk for a minute about the broader issues behind this ruling and what it would mean for Italy to recognize your innocence here?
I I mean, it would mean that they would recognize that the interrogation methods employed in this case were. I mean, here's the thing, though. They already recognized that. Like, the prosecutor in this case acknowledged in these proceedings that I was abused by the police and that it was inappropriate and embarrassing for the law enforcement community in Italy. But he said that nevertheless, I knowingly accused an innocent person, regardless of how bad the police treated me. So, the way Carlo puts it is that nobody wants to take responsibility in Italy for fucking over an innocent young girl, which is really rich, considering that they wanted to throw me in prison for the majority of my life for the murder of an innocent young girl. And I don't know, like, I thought also because, Rudy Gaudet has come out and shown his true colors that people might have changed their mind about me.
Yeah, can you give us the quick update on Rudy Gaudet?
He's under investigation right now for sexually and physically assaulting the girlfriend that he had after he got out of prison. And there's, tons of corroborating evidence, and, it's still in the investigation phase, but it's going to go into the trial phase soon enough.
And it's looking pretty bad for him.
And it's looking very bad for him. And I thought that given the fact that he had shown his true colors, people were really deeply reconsidering the facts of the case and were like, oh, dang, maybe he was the person who did it after all, and Amanda really didn't have anything to do with it. But it just doesn't seem like Florence was poised to give me that benefit of the doubt. For whatever reason. I'm not going to speculate as to their reasons when I don't have the motivation document yet, and I don't want to make any claims about politics or whatever, but they're wrong. They're wrong, and they didn't want to take responsibility, and they just made it worse by making me go through yet more crap like this. So, I don't know. I'm both really frustrated. I'm sad because I thought Italy had gotten better than this. And it showed me that, at least in some corner of Italy, nobody has learned anything from what happened to me. And which, again, to answer your question about the broader issues, there are a lot of issues that my case raises. One of them is, how did the media influence the law enforcement officials to start, making mistakes? What kind of mistakes did they make, including jumping to conclusions and abusing their power, all of that? And at what cost? Like, it's cost Italy so much in reputational damage, but also money. Like, they spent so much money on this case unnecessarily, and it's just embarrassing. Everyone in the world knows it, and yet, like, they just didn't want to cop to it. And again, I'm still like, how are they going to justify this? I don't know.
How do you feel about Italy as a country, aside from this insane insistence on finding you guilty of something?
Well, that's a good question, because right now I'm feeling pretty angry.
I mean, it's just a shame, I think, because you clearly love Italy.
Yeah.
You love Italian food and music and the language.
And people.
And the people. And Italy just hasn't figured out how to reciprocate that.
Yeah.
Can you say a few words about Patrick here?
I think I said them in the hearing. What I said was, the reason why his name even came up was because the police found a text message on my phone. So that's the reason why Patrick even came up, not because I brought him up. The police did when they brought up my phone. But furthermore, I said that I had no reason to want to to accuse Patrick of a crime. Like, he was a friend of mine. He took care of me. Like, I was a 20-year-old kid who was newly to the city, and he gave me a job so that I could practice my Italian, serving, drinks and stuff to his clients. And he, took me under his wing. And even the day, a day or two before we were both arrested, he was consoling me over, Meredith's loss. So, like, the idea that I would just accuse this friend of mine, like, of a heinous crime, knowing him to be innocent, is completely ludicrous. Not that I would accuse anyone of a crime, no matter if I knew them to be innocent, but, the point being that, like, we were not enemies, and the way that the media has pitted us against each other is completely inaccurate. And the way that his attorney has represented the facts is completely inaccurate. We are victims of the same people. He is not my victim. I did not knowingly and willingly falsely accuse him.
How do you feel about the fact that he doesn't view it that way?
I mean, I suppose for him, he doesn't care about intention. He cares about impact, I suppose.
Yeah, the thing about impact for me is that what happened to Lumumba was his bar was shut down for a couple weeks while he was being held in custody.
It was closed more than just a few weeks. They kept it closed for a long time.
They forced him to keep it closed?
Yes.
Even after he was released?
Yes. The police were fucking bastards about it, but that's the thing. It was the police.
Okay, so that was even worse than I realized. So he lost his business, basically. He ended up moving to Poland, where his wife is from. And it turned his life upside down. And it put a stain on his reputation. That stuff all sucks. No one should have to go through that as an innocent person. But even if you grant the premise that you had falsely accused him, which I don't grant at all and think is ludicrous, you're not the one who rushed off to arrest him based on some incoherent, jumbly statement. Right. You're not the one who held him in custody,
despite the fact that there was evidence that he was innocent.
People were coming forward with his alibi right away, and the police didn't care and they didn't let him go.
Yeah.
They had zero corroborating evidence for the confused statement they coerced you, and they didn't let him go. And then even after Rudy Gaudet was caught.
Even after I recanted.
Even after you recanted, the day after those confessions, or hours later, they didn't let him go. And when Rudy Gaudet was caught, or they let him go, but then they kept his bar closed, right? So like all those unjust consequences for Patrick are all from the police. And that sucks, and he deserves restitution from the police. Did he actually get some restitution from the police?
I think it was something pitiful, like, $2,000 or something.
Well, what's next here for you?
What's next is we wait 60 days for the motivation document to even understand how they're going to, in their twisted way, justify this ridiculous verdict. And then my attorneys are going to write a document appealing this verdict and submit it to the Corte di Cassazione, which is the Italian version of the Supreme Court. And then what's likely going to happen is, like, a year later, they'll, get a hearing by the Court of Cassation and hopefully get this thing overturned. But, that's uncertain, and that's a ways away. So that's the situation. It's a lot of just waiting now.
Does any part of you want to just let this go?
No.
No?
No. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not a liar. I did not slander anyone. I'm going to fight it until I can't fight it anymore. So that's the situation. And it's going to be okay. I'm going to hold my head high. I did nothing wrong. I feel like I'm in hostile territory, but you never know unless you put yourself out there. So maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. We'll see. I put myself out. The thing is, it's like, I put myself out there in front of the court and I poured my heart out. And it's really frustrating when multiple times that's happened to me, I've just had people crush me. Just like close the door in my face with a big old fuck you. Here's the maximum sentence I can possibly give you for this ridiculous verdict. And so that's the situation.
What rotten luck?
Maybe. Fun fact, for every hour of Labyrinths you enjoy, we put in dozens of hours researching, outreaching, interviewing, scripting, editing, and audio engineering.
What keeps us going?
Coffee. So if you're enjoying Labyrinths, please buy us a coffee.
Head over to patreon.com/Knox Robinson, where you can make a monthly donation.
Thanks for getting lost with us.